She was pushed past her breaking point. But her victory over the Navy SEALs stirred the colonel's soul. Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her friends spent weekends at the mall, she was climbing trees, fixing engines with her father, and running miles through dusty country roads. Her determination was legendary among family and friends, but nothing could have prepared her for what lay ahead. The decision to join the military came after a devastating family tragedy. Sarah's younger brother, Michael, had been killed in action overseas, leaving behind a wife and twin daughters. At his funeral, as she watched the flag being folded and handed to his widow, something inside Sarah shifted. She couldn't bring Michael back, but she could honor his memory by serving her country with the same courage he had shown. Against her family's wishes, Sarah enlisted in the Navy. Her mother cried for days, begging her to reconsider. Her father, a veteran himself, understood, but worried about the challenges his daughter would face in a male-dominated world. Sarah's resolve remained unshaken. She had found her purpose. Basic training was brutal but manageable. Sarah's natural athleticism and mental toughness helped her excel where others struggled. She graduated near the top of her class, earning respect from instructors who had initially doubted her capabilities. But Sarah wanted more than just to serve. She wanted to prove that women could handle the most demanding roles in the military. When the opportunity arose to attempt Navy SEAL training, Sarah knew it was her chance to make history. Only a handful of women had ever been allowed to try, and none had succeeded in completing the grueling program. The statistics were daunting, but Sarah had never backed down from a challenge. The news of her acceptance into SEAL training spread quickly through her unit. Some colleagues offered encouragement, while others whispered doubts about her chances. A few made it clear they believed she was taking a spot from a more deserving male candidate. The pressure was immense, but Sarah channeled it into fuel for her preparation. For months before reporting to training, Sarah pushed her body to its absolute limits. She ran 20 miles before dawn, swam in freezing ocean water, and practiced holding her breath until her lungs burned. She studied every manual, watched every video, and spoke with former SEALs who shared their experiences. Her dedication was total and unwavering. The first day of SEAL training arrived like a storm. Sarah stood among 47 other candidates, the only woman in a sea of hardened men. Some had been preparing for years, others came from elite military units. All had one thing in common: they believed they had what it took to become a Navy SEAL. The instructors made their expectations clear from the beginning. They would push every candidate beyond their perceived limits. They would break down bodies and spirits, then see who had the strength to rebuild themselves. The failure rate was over 80%, and they warned that being the first woman to attempt the program would not earn Sarah any special treatment. The physical demands began immediately: endless push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups under the scorching California sun. Ocean swims in frigid water that numbed fingers and toes within minutes. Obstacle courses that seemed designed by someone who wanted to inflict maximum suffering. Sarah's body screamed in protest, but her mind remained focused on her goal. What surprised her most was not the physical torture, but the psychological warfare. Instructors targeted her relentlessly, questioning her motives, her abilities, and her right to be there. They made her carry extra weight during runs, perform additional exercises, and endure scrutiny that her male counterparts didn't face. Some of her fellow candidates began to resent her presence, believing she was making their own experience more difficult. The breaking point came during the third week of training. It was during a particularly brutal exercise known as surf torture, where candidates were forced to lie in the freezing ocean surf while instructors screamed orders and questioned their commitment. Sarah had been in the water for over an hour, her body temperature dropping dangerously low, when one instructor began a verbal assault that cut deeper than the cold. He questioned her dead brother's service, suggesting that Michael would be ashamed of his sister's failure to quit when she was clearly outmatched. He described in graphic detail how she was holding back the team and endangering lives with her presence. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, each one designed to shatter her resolve and send her running for the bell that would end her torment. As hypothermia began to set in and her vision started to blur, Sarah felt something inside her break, not her spirit, but rather the last connection to the girl she used to be. The pain, the cold, the humiliation, and the attacks on her brother's memory crystallized into something harder than steel. In that moment of absolute degradation, she found an inner strength she never knew existed. Instead of ringing the bell, Sarah began to laugh. Not hysterically, but with genuine amusement at the absurdity of men thinking they could break her with words and cold water. Her laughter was so unexpected and unnerving that the instructor stopped his tirade and stared at her. She met his gaze with eyes that held no fear, no doubt, only an unshakable determination that seemed to unnerve him more than any amount of crying or pleading ever could. She was pushed past her breaking point, but her victory over the Navy SEALs stirred the colonel's soul. The weeks following the surf torture incident marked a turning point in Sarah's training experience. Word of her unbreakable spirit during the hypothermia exercise spread among the instructors, creating a grudging respect even among those who had initially opposed her presence. However, this respect came with an unexpected consequence. The training became even more intense. Sarah found herself becoming the unofficial benchmark for the entire class. If she could complete a task, then surely the men could as well. This unspoken expectation placed enormous pressure on her fellow candidates, some of whom began to openly blame her for their own failures. The camaraderie that typically developed among SEAL trainees was notably absent, replaced by tension and resentment. The psychological isolation was perhaps more challenging than any physical test. During meal breaks, conversations would stop when Sarah approached. Study groups formed without including her. Equipment mysteriously went missing from her gear, forcing her to complete exercises with substandard tools. The instructors either didn't notice or chose to ignore these incidents, considering them part of the natural selection process. Despite the hostile environment, Sarah's performance continued to improve. Her run times dropped consistently, her swimming technique became more efficient, and her shooting accuracy surpassed many of her peers. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The small-town girl who had entered training was being forged into something formidable and precise. The most grueling test came during Hell Week, a 5-day period of continuous training with minimal sleep and food. Candidates were pushed to their absolute physical and mental limits, with many choosing to quit rather than endure another moment of suffering. Sarah entered Hell Week as one of 23 remaining candidates, down from the original 48. The first night involved a seemingly endless series of challenges in the freezing ocean. Candidates carried heavy boats over their heads, performed countless calisthenics, and endured hours of cold water immersion. By dawn, 4 more candidates had rung the bell and walked away. Sarah's lips were blue, her hands shaking uncontrollably, but her eyes still held that fierce determination that had unsettled her instructors. Day 2 brought the infamous log carrying exercises. Teams of 6 candidates were required to carry massive telephone poles over obstacle courses, through sand dunes, and into the surf. The logs weighed several hundred pounds and required perfect coordination to move effectively. Sarah's team struggled initially, as some members deliberately worked against her, hoping to force her to quit. The sabotage backfired spectacularly. When Sarah realized what was happening, she adapted her strategy. Instead of trying to work with uncooperative teammates, she positioned herself to bear more than her share of the log's weight. Her smaller frame meant she had to work twice as hard to compensate, but her technique and endurance were superior. By the end of the exercise, she was carrying her unconscious teammate while still supporting her portion of the log. The display of strength and determination caught the attention of Colonel James Harrison, who had been observing the training from a distance. Harrison was a decorated special operations veteran who had seen countless warriors forged in the crucible of elite training. He had initially been skeptical about allowing women in SEAL training, believing that the integration would lower standards and compromise unit effectiveness. Watching Sarah refuse to quit while carrying an unconscious teammate challenged Harrison's preconceptions. He began to follow her progress more closely, noting not just her physical capabilities but her problem-solving skills and leadership qualities. During one particularly challenging navigation exercise, Sarah's team became lost in dense fog. While others panicked or argued, she calmly analyzed the situation and guided her team to safety using only basic compass skills and instinct. The halfway point of Hell Week brought the most devastating challenge yet: the pool competency test. Candidates were bound hand and foot, then required to swim 50 meters underwater and retrieve objects from the pool bottom. The exercise simulated being captured and thrown into water, testing both physical ability and mental composure under extreme stress. Sarah's smaller lung capacity put her at a significant disadvantage compared to her male counterparts. She had practiced the exercise countless times during preparation, but the cumulative effects of sleep deprivation and physical exhaustion made everything more difficult. On her first attempt, she barely made it 20 meters before being forced to surface for air. The instructor offered her an easy way out. She could take a medical exemption due to her physical limitations, and no one would question her courage or commitment. Many male candidates had failed this test over the years, and there was no shame in acknowledging biological differences. Sarah listened politely to the offer, then requested permission to try again. Her second attempt was worse than the first. The rope bindings seemed tighter, the water colder, and her lungs burned within seconds of submerging. She surfaced gasping and defeated, while several male candidates completed the test successfully. The instructor's expression showed pity rather than contempt, which somehow made the failure feel worse. That night, as Sarah lay on her narrow cot nursing her wounded pride, she overheard two instructors discussing her case. They agreed she had shown remarkable heart and determination, but biology couldn't be overcome through willpower alone. They were preparing to recommend her removal from the program, not for lack of effort, but for safety reasons. The conversation ignited something fierce within Sarah. She spent the remaining hours before dawn practicing breathing techniques and meditation exercises her brother had taught her years earlier. Michael had learned them during his own military training, and they had helped him stay calm under pressure. If they had kept her brother alive in combat situations, perhaps they could help her survive one swimming test. Her third and final attempt at the pool competency test became legendary among SEAL training instructors. Sarah approached the exercise with a calmness that surprised everyone watching. She controlled her breathing, visualized success, and entered the water with complete mental clarity. Instead of fighting against her physical limitations, she worked with them. Using a technique she had developed during her midnight practice sessions, Sarah moved through the water like a dolphin, using her entire body to propel herself forward while conserving oxygen. She completed the 50-meter swim with seconds to spare, then methodically retrieved each required object from the pool bottom. When she surfaced for the final time, gasping but victorious, the pool deck was silent except for the sound of water dripping from her hair. Colonel Harrison witnessed the entire test from the observation deck. He had come expecting to watch Sarah's elimination from the program, but instead observed something that challenged every assumption he had held about women in combat roles. Her victory wasn't achieved through superior physical strength or natural advantages, but through intelligence, adaptability, and an unbreakable will to succeed. She was pushed past her breaking point, but her victory over the Navy SEALs stirred the colonel's soul. The final weeks of SEAL training transformed Sarah from an outsider fighting for acceptance into an integral member of an elite brotherhood. Her pool competency victory had earned grudging respect from fellow candidates who had previously shunned her. More importantly, it had proven to herself that she belonged among the world's most elite warriors. Only 8 candidates remained from the original 48, and Sarah was the sole woman still standing. The final challenges were designed to test not just individual capability, but team cohesion and leadership under extreme pressure. These exercises would determine who possessed the complete package of skills necessary to serve as a Navy SEAL. The capstone exercise was a simulated hostage rescue mission in an abandoned urban training facility. Candidates were divided into 2 teams and given minimal intelligence about enemy positions and hostage locations. They had to plan and execute a complex operation while being observed by senior officers who would evaluate every decision and action. Sarah found herself appointed as team leader for the mission, a role that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Her appointment came not through political correctness or token gestures, but because her tactical knowledge and calm decision-making under pressure had impressed instructors throughout the training cycle. The responsibility was enormous, as failure would likely eliminate her entire team from the program. The mission parameters were deliberately vague and constantly changing. Intelligence reports conflicted with each other, equipment malfunctioned at critical moments, and team members were randomly designated as wounded to simulate battlefield casualties. Sarah had to adapt her strategy multiple times while maintaining operational security and team morale. Her tactical approach demonstrated the problem-solving skills that had caught Colonel Harrison's attention weeks earlier. Instead of relying on brute force or conventional tactics, Sarah identified weaknesses in enemy positioning that others had overlooked. She coordinated a complex infiltration that required split-second timing and absolute trust between team members. The mission's climax came when Sarah's team encountered unexpected resistance while attempting to secure the hostage location. 2 of her teammates were designated as casualties, leaving her with insufficient personnel to complete the original plan. Rather than abort the mission or request assistance, Sarah improvised a solution that required her to expose herself to significant personal risk. She created a diversion that drew enemy fire while her remaining teammates flanked the position. The tactic succeeded brilliantly, but Sarah took simulated wounds that would have been fatal in actual combat. Her willingness to sacrifice herself for mission success demonstrated the selfless leadership that defined elite warriors throughout history. The exercise concluded with all hostages rescued and objectives secured. Sarah's team had achieved complete success despite facing the most challenging scenario parameters. As the candidates gathered for debriefing, the weight of what had just occurred began to sink in. They had witnessed something unprecedented in SEAL training history. Colonel Harrison personally conducted the final evaluation meeting. He had been tracking Sarah's progress since the pool competency test, documenting her tactical innovations and leadership development. Her final mission performance had exceeded his expectations and challenged his fundamental beliefs about combat effectiveness and military integration. The formal graduation ceremony took place on a pristine California morning with families and dignitaries in attendance. 8 candidates would receive the coveted SEAL trident that marked their entry into one of the world's most exclusive military communities. Sarah's parents had flown in from Texas, their earlier fears replaced by overwhelming pride in their daughter's achievement. As each graduate's name was called, they stepped forward to receive their trident and shake hands with the commanding officers. The moment carried special weight for every participant, representing the culmination of months of suffering and sacrifice. For Sarah, it represented something even more significant: proof that barriers could be broken through determination and excellence. When Sarah's name was announced, the applause seemed different from what had preceded it. There was recognition that history was being made, that a glass ceiling had been shattered through sheer force of will and capability. She stepped forward with the same quiet confidence that had carried her through every challenge, accepting her trident with dignity and grace. Colonel Harrison presented Sarah with her award personally, something typically reserved for distinguished graduates or special circumstances. As he pinned the trident to her uniform, he spoke quietly enough that only she could hear his words. He told her that she had changed his mind about women in combat roles, not through arguments or politics, but through demonstrated excellence that couldn't be denied. The colonel's admission was more meaningful to Sarah than any medal or recognition could have been. She had not just completed SEAL training, she had earned the respect of someone who had initially opposed her presence. The personal growth that achievement represented was perhaps more valuable than the military qualification itself. Following graduation, Sarah was assigned to a SEAL team based on the West Coast. The transition from training environment to operational unit presented new challenges as she worked to build trust and camaraderie with teammates who would depend on her in life-or-death situations. Her training reputation preceded her, but operational credibility had to be earned through performance rather than potential. The assignment also reunited Sarah with Colonel Harrison, who had requested her placement in his command structure. He wanted to observe how her unique combination of skills and perspective would contribute to actual missions rather than training exercises. His request represented a significant endorsement of her capabilities and potential contributions. Sarah's first operational deployment took her to a region where her brother had previously served. The coincidence was not lost on her as she prepared for missions that would honor his memory through her own service. She carried a photo of Michael in her gear, a reminder of the family tragedy that had originally motivated her military career. The deployment tested every skill Sarah had developed during training while introducing new challenges that no exercise could fully simulate. She proved herself repeatedly in high-stakes situations, earning the trust and respect of teammates who had initially been skeptical about serving alongside a female SEAL. Her tactical innovations and cultural sensitivity proved invaluable in complex operational environments. Colonel Harrison's final evaluation of Sarah's performance contained language rarely seen in military assessments. He described her as a transformational leader whose presence had elevated the capabilities of her entire unit. Her success had not diminished standards or compromised effectiveness. Instead, it had demonstrated that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources when given the opportunity to flourish. The colonel's report became part of a broader policy review regarding women in special operations roles. Sarah's documented achievements provided concrete evidence that integration could succeed when based on merit rather than quotas or political considerations. Her victory had stirred more than just the colonel's soul. It had opened minds throughout the military establishment. Years later, Sarah would reflect on her journey from small-town grief to elite warrior status. The transformation had cost her everything she thought she knew about herself, while revealing capabilities she never imagined possessing. Her brother's death had catalyzed a quest for purpose that ultimately redefined what was possible for women in military service. Through breaking her own barriers, she had shattered limitations that had constrained countless others who would follow in her footsteps.